I want to welcome both Lynda and Allison. Let me just tell you a bit about Lynda. Lynda Cohen Loigman grew up in Longmeadow, Massachusetts, and she received a BA in English and American Literature from Harvard College and a JD from Columbia Law School. Her debut novel, which she had here at the launch here at the library, The Two-Family House, was a USA Today bestseller and a nominee for the Goodreads 2000. It was her debut novel. It was a USA Today and a nominee for the Goodreads 2016 Choice Awards in Historical Fiction. Her second novel, The Wartime Sisters, was selected as a Women's World Book Club pick and a best book for 2019 by Real Simple magazine. The Matchmaker's Gift, which we're going to hear about today, is her third novel, and it is a heartwarming story of two women from two different eras who defy expectations to utilize their gift of seeing soulmates in the most unexpected places. The person interviewing her today, or in conversation with her today, is Allison Pataki. Allison is a writer of adult fiction, adult nonfiction, and children's books. Her work has been translated into 20 languages and is popular in more than 20 countries. A former news writer and producer, Allison has written for the New York Times, ABC News, Huffington Post, USA Today, Fox News, and other outlets. She has appeared on The Today Show, Good Morning America, Fox and Friends, Good Day New York, Good Day Chicago, and MSNBC's Good Morning Joe. Her newest book, The Magnificent Lives of Marjorie Post, an American heiress and trailblazing leader of the 20th century. So please welcome Lynda and Allison. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Lynda.
Hi.
Well,
is my mic? Yeah. Okay.
Everybody can hear us?
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi. So, The Matchmaker's Gift, the reason we are here tonight, Lynda. Can we start with a round of applause for you and a congratulations? Just such a beautiful book. You can see from the cover that Kate Quinn has called it a gem, and it truly is a gem. Personally, my favorite of yours so far, and that's a very high bar because you are a brilliant storyteller. But can you start with, presumably we have a mixed audience here. Some have read, some have not yet finished it.
Sure.
Everyone's going to get it tonight. Can you start with the story behind the story and how and why you came to write your beautiful third book?
Yes. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? First, I just want to say thank you so much to Allison for coming tonight. I thought Allison lived in the city, but then when I found out that she actually didn't live in the city, I could prevail upon her to come and be here tonight. So she was very kind to come tonight. And also, I just want to point out that I have a lot of my agent is here, my publicist is here, my author friends are here. My daughter surprised me all the way from Washington, D.C., and I didn't know she was coming. And so many of my awesome Chappaqua friends are here, and just so many wonderful people. So I'm just grateful to all of you for coming. Thank you. My writing teacher is here, so just thank you, everybody, for coming. It just means a lot. Yeah, it's really special. It means a lot to me. So this book. The idea for this book came, if you look inside your books, you'll see that this book's dedicated to Ellie, to my daughter, and her roommate, Adele. And Adele is at Cornell, which rhymes, but so she's not here tonight.
Adele at Cornell.
Adele's at Cornell. So when the COVID lockdown started in March of 2020, Ellie called me from school on a Tuesday and said, we have to be out by Sunday. We have to come home. So she came home from school, like so many, everybody here, so many people's kids came home, but Adele came with her. Adele was her roommate at school, and she came with her. And so all of a sudden, everybody's lives changed, but my life changed in a specific sort of way that led me to this story. And before she came home, I was living like in a house of men. I was there with Bob, my husband, and Charlie, my son, and Winston, my male dog. And life was just, regular stuff. And then all of a sudden, I'm joined by these two really smart, really ambitious, college-age young women who are in the middle of taking classes, right? They're literally enrolled in college while they're living in the house.
Yeah.
So the dinner at the conversation at the dinner table is elevated, to say the least. And we're talking about like women's issues. Really, we were talking about just things that I hadn't been talking at the dinner table. You know, I had the things that Bob and Charlie and I had not been discussing. And I was really struck during some of our conversations by the fact that, you know, things just hadn't changed that much in 30 years. We were talking about some of the things they were facing at school, some of the things that they were potentially going to be facing in the workplace. And they asked me about some of my stories when I was working as a lawyer in New York. So that was kind of going on in my brain. And at the same time, you know, we did what everybody did during COVID. We all ate and we cooked a lot, and then we binge watched television. So we were binge watching Indian Matchmaking, which is like a super fun, fantastic show with a whole, you know, different culture of matchmaking. And at the end of, when we finished all the seasons, Adele turned to me and said, you know, my grandmother was an Orthodox Jewish matchmaker, which I hadn't known. And she pulled up on her phone this photograph from the New York Times, because the New York Times had written an article about her grandmother and about matchmakers in Brooklyn at the time. It was in the 1970s. And somewhere in that story, there was mention of a file cabinet. It was like a file cabinet that held people's matches, that held the records of one of the matchmakers' matches. And I immediately, you know that book from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Vasily Frankweiler?
Yes.
Right. So I thought of that. And I think I said to Marley, like, I kind of want to write a matchmaker book, and I want to call it, like, From the Mixed Up Files of Sarah Glickman or something.
Yeah.
And Marley was like, I don't know if I would call it that, because that sounds like a children's story, but I like this matchmaker idea. She called me the next day. I told her about it, and I was working on another book, and there had been another book that I had written that I hadn't sold, that was like a heartache. And so the next day, Marley called me. I remember it very vividly. She called me. She's like, I've been thinking about this matchmaker book, like, all day, and I think we should tell your editor about this book. And then, I said, okay, and she did. And then they said, we really want that book. Like, write that book. But that book, what did I even know that book was? All I had was this idea that it would be a book about a matchmaker. And then, you know, when I say a matchmaker book, you think that it's going to be a romance. But I don't write romance. I write historical fiction. So then I had to come at it from a historical point of view. And then that's when it started. So that's the story of how it kind of became a thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Marley. Thank you, Adele. Was Adele still there? Like, did you still have her?
I asked Adele. Yeah, no, they were there. And I said, Adele, I kind of want to write a story about a matchmaker and her granddaughter. Do you care? Like, it won't be about you. Do you care? And she's like, right, Ellie? She didn't care. She was like, fine. She didn't care.
You had a really productive quarantine.
I did.
And then you couldn't go anywhere, so you just stayed there and researched and wrote.
I wrote this
presumably
book faster than any. You know, I started in August and it was done in April, which is really fast for me because it takes me over a year to write a book.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about that because when you write the book, something that you do so beautifully, I think you're on like your own level in this way is you build these worlds and these characters where you can taste the food. I feel like your characters are always wrapping up leftovers in tinfoil, right? That's like a common theme.
It's my life.
And then I'm so hungry when I'm reading your books because they all have amazing food, and your characters are so real and they just pop up off the page. And so you build these really rich, layered, sumptuous worlds and these really complex, deep, layered characters. Can you talk about how you do that? And can you talk about your characters in this book, particularly Sarah and Abby, and sort of how we're following their two stories?
So this book is a dual timeline story. It has two timelines, two main characters. So Sarah is the grandmother character, but we meet her when she's a young girl, and her story takes place in the 1910s and 1920s on the Lower East Side predominantly. And then Abby, her granddaughter, her story is in 1994. And in terms of, Sarah finds, even as a young age, when we meet her, she's 10 years old, she has this gift, this ability to see who people's soulmates should be. And unfortunately for Abby, she has inherited this gift, but it's very problematic for her because she's a divorce attorney. Yes. So that's a problematic thing to happen.
That was so good.
That was a fun thing. So character building, I mean, I really, a big part of my writing process is just thinking about my characters and sitting with them for a very long time. So that's why usually it takes me such a long time to write, because maybe it's just laziness or maybe it's something else. I don't know what it is, but I just need to sit with them. I need to just think about them. So when I go to sleep at night, like I am thinking about them and thinking about what they're going to do next. And particularly during quarantine, writing this book was such a gift. It was such an escape, because they were such special characters, and this is a lighter book than my other books. My other 2 books are pretty serious. So for me to go to sleep at night and have something to think about other than, is everybody going to get sick? Is something terrible going to happen?
Next episode.
Like what's going to happen tomorrow? It was thinking about those characters. So I wouldn't say I have conversations with them in my head. It's not that, but it's just a lot of thinking about what they would do next. And I just take a lot of time in between writing. Before I write, it's always like a time when I just try to figure out what those layers, like you said, the layers of the character.
So then do you go to sleep and just dream about them? Or do they just have parties in your subconscious while you're sleeping?
I kind of do. Yeah. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I try to, I make a note in my phone.
Yeah, amazing.
Because
amazing.
You forget. I think a lot of us do that.
Yeah. So it's funny though, because Abby is the divorce attorney and Sarah is the matchmaker, but there's a lot of romance in Abby's story, and it's not all love and romance and weddings in Sarah's story, but that was a really beautiful relationship, and sort of it has a lot of love, obviously, but it's also just relationships and just the human experience.
Yeah, it's. When I thought about this story, I knew that there would be a lot of different matches for Sarah. So there are a lot of different, little vignettes, kind of matches that she makes, of partners that she finds for other people. And a lot of them are based on real things that happened, which is what made it so fun.
Yes.
So when I first started researching, like you said, I couldn't go anywhere. I was at home, like we were all at home. And I found on the Museum at Eldridge website something called Love on the Lower East Side, which was their little online virtual exhibit. And they referenced this wedding of this man who they called the Pickle Millionaire and his daughter, Edith Karp. And the headline in the New York Times was, "Karp Wedding Dazzles East Side." And there was a line in this little exhibit about the wedding that I pretty much have memorized because it's my favorite line. So it said, "The scent of orange blossoms and roses mingled with the odors of dried herring and pickles." So
what everyone wants for their wedding, right?
Exactly. So I think I sent that article to Marley. I sent that article to my editor. When I saw that, then I knew that was my time period, because I was struggling. I knew I was going to write a matchmaker book. I knew I had to research the history, what is the history of matchmakers. But I didn't know what time period at first. So that was, when I found that, I knew what the time period would be. So that's one of the little vignettes. That actually becomes a pretty big character. I call him the Pickle King instead of the Pickle Millionaire.
So good.
And his daughter and that match. And then there's the match of the Kinishwar families. Yes, so that was the other thing that was really fun.
Yes.
Yeah. So there was a real Kinishwar on the Lower East Side in 1916. There were rival Knish stores. You can't even make this up.
That's why historical fiction.
You can't make it up.
Yeah.
So one guy sold his Knishes for 5 cents, and then the other guy said, "I'm going to sell mine for 4 cents." And then the other guy brought in a band, and then the guy across the street started selling coupons. If you ate enough Knishes, you would win something. You would win a pocket knife. And someone ate 20 Knishes and was carried out of the store, because he was so sick from all the Knishes.
Yeah, right? You win and you lose.
Yeah, exactly. But when I read that, my brain went to, well, that's just like a Romeo and Juliet story.
Yes, totally.
Right? It's the Capulets and the Montagues.
Exactly.
Except it's Knish Man 1 and Knish Man 2. Yeah. So that became one of the, so all of Sarah's stories, but Sarah has a lot of challenges also, which we'll talk about, but and she is fighting against the men who so one of the things, so I said before, when Ellie and Adele came home, we were talking about all these women's issues, and so that was in my head when I was writing this story. And when I was doing the research and I found out about the Pickle King, I also found this other article that talked about the shadchaniyim, the Yiddish word for matchmaker. The matchmakers on the Lower East Side, but just in Manhattan generally. And it said that there were over 5,000 matchmakers in New York in 1910, which is crazy. Over 5,000 professional matchmakers, and most of them were men.
Mm-hmm.
And that, between like everything that I was thinking about with the girls living in my house, the young women living in my house, and that line, I was just like, well, there's my conflict, right? Because I'm going to write about a young woman. I'm going to write about a young woman matchmaker.
Yeah.
And there are going to be all these men who are not going to like the fact that she has this talent. And they're going to be viewing her as a threat. And it's like, it's a tale as old as time, right? Like, the woman like fighting against this group of men who don't want her to take their place.
So good, so good. And you talk in your author's note about how for a lot of people, our initial concept of what a matchmaker is what we get of this idea of the yenta from Fiddler on the Roof, and that you were going to tell a very different story, and also just, I think, teach us a lot in the process too about the actual history of matchmaking, the old world, the new world in New York City. I mean, that was fascinating how you did that.
It's a fun, what's funny, that we've never talked about this, but when I first was looking for like anything about matchmaking, I actually went to the Bible, because I was like, okay, well, what's the biblical thing? So the first matchmaker in the Bible is Abraham's servant Eliezer, and he sends him to look for a wife for Isaac. So that was a man too. Like the very first reference to one is a man also.
Wow.
So I should have known when I read that there were going to be a lot of things about men. Yeah.
And so Sarah's gift, the matchmaker's gift, brings us into, it's historical, it's a historical fiction novel, but it brings us into some magic.
Yeah.
And how you wrote about and sort of created for the reader the way her gift manifests itself, and then eventually her granddaughter as well. How did you decide on that? How did you write that? I mean, it was so beautiful when she would have these moments of clarity, really, about a match.
That was the scariest part, because I've never written anything like that before. So my favorite book when I was growing up was this book called Half Magic by Edward Eger, which is about 4 kids and they find a coin and they make wishes, but it only gives you half of what you wish for, so they have to figure out their wishes. I love all the Harry Potter books. I do love those things, but I'm not a fantasy writer. But I wanted to have a little smidgen of it. I love Alice Hoffman's books, and she often has a little smidgen of magical realism. Or there are a lot of writers that do it. Really, we were talking about All the Light We Cannot See. That has some of that in it. Those sorts of things. But I really didn't know if I could do that, if I could pull that off. So that was the scariest part. I did it. I put it in, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
But it seemed to me that it was going to have to be something that she sees. Physically sees, because there's this whole idea of love at first sight, right? That love is blind. There's just, when we talk about these sort of cliches about love, it's always somehow involves the eyes. It involves something with vision. So I thought that it should. So she actually sees. She just sees a filament of light.
It is so beautiful. The first time you wrote about a match, her seeing one pretty early on.
Yeah.
I had to go back and reread it multiple times, because just to see the way you built it with your words, it's magical. Oh. It really is magical. So she has this gift, which kind of puts her at odds with a lot of the more established older male matchmakers who maybe don't have the gift or the raw talent. Maybe they've sort of been grandfathered into this old boys club.
Yeah.
And so that puts her at odds with this very established power dynamic of the young woman with the older men. But you have you explore a lot of different relationships and themes of these power dynamics, because you have the old world and the new, the immigrant story of coming to New York. Then with Abby, you have her with her boss, with her senior. You have a lot of questions of, the male-female dynamics, the age. So was that something that you were actively trying to sort of complicate for your characters and sort of
I wanted them to
parallel?
They both are trying to figure out their career. Because it really was Sarah's career. She she is desperate for money at one point in the story because her family is poor. So it's her chosen career, and Abby's trying to navigate her career too. And Abby thinks she wants to be a divorce attorney because her parents went through a terrible divorce. But it's not what she thought that it would be. She went into it because she had every good intention of trying to help people, because she felt like her mother didn't have a good divorce attorney, didn't have good representation or help when her mother was going through it. But she's working, it's like for celebrities, it's like high profile celebrity divorces, and it just doesn't feel the way she thought it was going to feel. And she has a very high powered female boss. So I didn't know I wanted to make her boss a woman.
Yeah. And it's interesting because she had this beautiful close relationship with her grandmother, who is Sarah. And Sarah always encouraged her to believe in love. She said, with everything that's going on in the world, why not believe in love? And Abby begins sort of from this place of having seen her parents' marriage, and we won't, get into any spoilers, but it's sort of interesting how you turn things on their head for the reader, where Abby's sort of disillusionment evolves over the course of her experience and her arc, and she sort of comes to sort of have this newfound appreciation for a connection with her grandmother, sort of posthumously, which is just beautiful. Did you have a close relationship with a grandparent, or sort of, because that felt really like real and powerful?
Yeah, I was very lucky. Because I had an adult relationship with my grandmother. She met my kids. So she died when she was 92.
Oh,
so she was around for a very long time. And my grandmother had no filter. Like in the book, Sarah has this sort of tagline that she says, "I see what I see and I know what I know." And my grandmother didn't say that, but my grandmother did. My grandmother used to say, you're right, you're not wrong. Like, it wasn't enough just to be right, you also had to be not wrong. Like that. So I don't know, there was something in the cadence of that I hear my grandmother's voice when I was writing, what Sarah was saying.
And
sometimes.
Did she say you were right and you were right and you were not wrong?
Oh, well,
it depends.
It depends. It depended what the conversation was, but that was something that she used to say.
So will you tell us a little more about your experience writing? So you said this was your fastest book you wrote, right? So what is a day, or if there is such a thing as a typical writing day for Lynda, the writer? What is your process like?
It's
with
so
or without
irregular.
a quarantine.
It's really irregular.
Okay.
Yeah. I try to write every day, but sometimes writing doesn't always mean writing. Like sometimes it just means thinking, like staring. We all have, I open up my computer and I stare at my story, and I sometimes write. I could write 1,000 words in a day, or I could write a sentence. With that book, I was writing at least 1,000 words. I was really trying to do that, and I have to try to be more productive again, because I'm kind of slacking off a little bit lately. But yeah, I find that I have to go to the story and look at it and try to be in it for a little bit. Otherwise, too much time passes. I don't know if you have that too, where too much time passes, and then when you go back to it, you have to sink yourself in, resubmerge.
Your characters are mad at you that you've stopped dreaming about them, or they've gone quiet.
You need to get back into the mindset of it.
So what are the things that feed you or inspire you as a writer?
I think, one of the things that was hard about COVID was, for a lot of writers, I think, is that, we didn't have those daily interactions that we're used to. And I think, I always say this, but people have heard me say this probably, but if you're at a grocery store and you think someone is eavesdropping on your conversation, that person is probably a writer, because that's what we like to do. We like to, you just get ideas from just living, from just walking through the world. If you're home alone by yourself, you don't really get ideas. So somehow this book came out, but I was finding inspiration in the past and in other stories and things that had happened to me. But generally, it's really good to be out in the world, to interact with people and have human contact. If you're going to write about real three-dimensional people, you need to be with real three-dimensional people.
So what was your research primarily for this book?
I couldn't go. I couldn't go anywhere. But so the Eldridge Street Museum had great stuff. The Jewish Museum, the New York Public Library, all of those places. The New York Times, I mean, I just kind of, it was very shocking to me that the New York Times wrote a story in 1909 about an immigrant wedding on the Lower East Side. Like that they would have covered that seemed really strange to me. And that also that they used like a Yiddish word in it, in the New York Times, right? That just seemed very odd. So then I kept like looking for more things. For some reason, like I find that looking at old newspapers and the forward, just like the Yiddish newspapers, looking at old newspapers is just a helpful kind of thing. There were also some old books that I found, Shulam the Shadchan, like this old crazy book that I got, I don't know, at some auction site. There were these cartoons that called the Gimple Baelish cartoons that were published in the Daily Forward that were interesting, that definitely showed like a man, like the kind of man I think that I'm trying to describe in the book, with the hat and the vest, and just sort of like always sort of down on his luck, not doing a great job finding matches to make and not really doing so well.
Not having the gift
there was a lot of there was a lot of research like that. What else did I do? A lot of people, you know what, like sort of one of the themes in the story, a smaller thread, is just this idea that people are changing at that time. So whereas it used to be that matches were always mercenary, at that time people wanted to become Americanized and assimilate, and they wanted a love match because that was a modern kind of thing. That was a sign of being a modern American person. And one of my college friends found out I was writing a Matchmaker book and sent me, she had just written a dissertation on marriage in America, like, and those sorts of themes, like, like that whole thing from like the late 1800s to the early 1900s. So that was really helpful. And she had a lot of sources in there that were helpful too.
And that was one of the things that was so unique about Sarah's gift, was that she was seeing things based on love versus the traditional way of doing it. And in the book, it seems like the New York all the press covers the Pickle King's wedding because he has assimilated and because he has been such a success story. His daughter, you know, has become a fully American. Was that sort of a similar trajectory with the inspiration, the story that you found there?
Because his daughter, it was shocking. Like his daughter, it says in the article, his daughter went to Barnard. You know, which was a very unusual thing too.
Sort of dream.
And actually, I was in the Barnard yearbook archives, and I was learning. There were a couple people wrote dissertations about Jews at Barnard, and how many Jewish people there were. And there were very few. There were Jews at Barnard at that time, Jewish young women, but they were generally very assimilated. They weren't like the Lower East Side kids of immigrants. They weren't, you know, they were people who were speaking English without an accent. They were already, they were from an earlier wave. So that was interesting. That was a sort of, I keep forgetting about that, but I did do like a lot of research about that.
So the cover is so beautiful, and it's different. It's got a different sort of vibe from your other covers. So did you, how much say did you have? How early on in the process did you get a peek at it? Or
so the story behind this cover is actually really interesting. Because my other covers I really didn't have much say, but when it came to this cover, I had a lot of thoughts, and my editor was so nice about it. So she suggested that we make a Google Doc. She made the Google Doc. I can put things in the Google Doc, but I don't know how to make a Google Doc. So, because I had this thought that I really wanted it to look like a ketubah. So I should have brought my ketubah. But for those who don't know, what a ketubah is a Jewish marriage contract. And when you get married, you sign them, and people almost always frame them because they're very beautiful. They're big, and they're highly decorated, and they're usually floral in theme. And I put in, you can find beautiful ones on Instagram. There are like ketubah accounts with beautiful ketubahs. There's one called Tallulah's Ketubahs, which you can go to and see. So here, I'm going to hold the book. So you can see like there's all the flowers on the outside, which is what a lot of ketubahs look like. And then a lot of times, like my ketubah has a little house to sort of represent like the marital home, and it has a tiny miniature Torah, like to show, like, and a mezuzah. And so I really wanted there to be things in this cover that were like that. And so they did it. Like they did everything that I asked. So there are the wedding rings that are on it, and there's the bracelet from the story. There are the spectacles, because there's this whole theme of vision, and there's a character who sells spectacles from his pushcart. And then that's my favorite thing, the pickle jar. 'Cause that's
Love the
my-
pickles.
the
Gotta have the pickles.
yeah, that was
How
what
many
I said.
pickles did you
Right.
eat while you were writing this?
I didn't really eat that many pickles, but I collected pickle paraphernalia. My friend Jen, who is here, gave me the greatest present today. She gave me a little, like, I don't know what you, like a little purse thing, and it says Pickle Queen on it.
Pickle Queen,
and then she gave me a mug that says I'm a big dill with like a pickle on it. Yeah.
So good.
So those are really great. Yeah.
So good.
That's my pickle theme
So when we share all this on social media, hashtag the book title, and then pickles and wedding
pickles,
rings,
pickles
right?
and wedding
That's what I'm
rings. And there's
seeing.
actually, so the cookies there, everybody please take a cookie before you go. So there's like cookies that look like the book, but there are cookies that look like a jar of pickles. They don't taste like
The
pickles.
sweet
taste like
smell
a cookie.
of cookies and
Yes,
pickles in the air at your
right.
launch party, right?
Right, oh my God,
And
yeah.
you match the cover,
Well,
and we both
ended up
matched the
matching
cover
together,
just
yeah,
because
somehow.
it's so beautiful.
Yeah, we
So
tried.
what would be like if you could send readers out into the world with sort of one overarching nugget or idea? What would you want to tell readers now that you're going to have the opportunity
Yeah.
to see people in person,
Yeah.
right? And have the
Yeah,
actual book launch experience in person. What do you want people to take from this?
I mean, I think generally, I mean, this was my most joyful book. So my other books, like I said, are a little more serious. I do hope people just get that joy from this story. I think like we all need happy stories right now. There's a lot of still, you know, we're not quite out of this yet. I'm so grateful that we could all be here. This is honestly like my first time not wearing a mask, like up on this stage, not wearing a mask inside. So I just hope people feel some joy from it. You know, that it just brings you a little joy, a little comfort. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's
that's
so immersive.
generally-
It's so it's a rich world to go into, and it's a day old. We're celebrating this book and celebrating you, and we're in the present. But can I ask, are you working on your next project? Is there anything you can share about what comes after
Yeah,
this?
sure. So I decided when I finished this book, I really wanted to have another book with a little thread of magic. So the next book is inspired by my husband's great-grandmother, my mother-in-law's grandmother, who was a pharmacist. And she graduated from pharmacy school in 1921, which is like really amazing. Like, and I've heard so many stories about her, so many stories. Carol, my mother-in-law, has her mortar and pestle, like that she used to use. So, but a pharmacy is like the greatest setting, right? Because a pharmacist back then was like your rabbi, your priest, your bartender,
your therapist.
Totally. So it's a young woman who, her father's a pharmacist, she becomes a pharmacist, and she's sort of caught between her father's like absolute faith in just like medicine, like just pure science. He's a very kind of cold guy. And then she has a great aunt who is sort of like concocting things in the kitchen, like more of like the old world homemade remedies. And there's sort of there is like a love potion that goes very wrong, like a very
So good.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. Yeah. It's a fun thing.
When I had COVID, you reached out and said that you wished you could bring some Jewish penicillin, which is chicken noodle soup, right? The old world remedy.
Yep.
Oh, that is so.
Yeah.
You're writing that.
I'm writing
You're
that.
obviously launching a book.
Yeah.
So you're a little busy.
I'm like between a third and a halfway done with that book. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
so
It's
good.
part of how I thought of it was actually that phrase, like Jewish penicillin. I want so there's like there's chicken soup in the book, like slightly magical chicken soup, like slightly magical.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we will be hungry again. You will make us hungry with another book. So, what are you the most excited for now that the book is out and you get to see
it's
people
just so nice
again?
to be with everybody. It's so nice.
You get to
so
see readers.
Nice to be with everyone. Yeah, to see readers and to just like have chats with everybody, to see all the, I don't know, everybody's here. It's just it's a lot of fun. It's just
a special
it's
moment.
fun. It's I think there's just a lot of joy at these book things because all of us writers, we're always alone anyway. You know, like what do? We just sit at home alone. And then
Listening to the
COVID, we were
voices
like
in your
super
head.
alone, right? Yeah, listening to the voices in our head. So we love to have a book party.
Absolutely.
So it's nice to be back out having a book
with
party.
pickle cookies, no
Yeah.
less.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it would be okay if we did a quick lightning round and just if I could just ask you some quick questions and just go with your your gut.
Okay.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Quiet or music or noise in the background?
Oh, quiet. Quiet.
Cure for writer's block?
A walk. Yeah.
What book is on your nightstand?
I keep talking about this book, but it is actually still on my nightstand. I already read it, but it's this When Women Were Dragons. We were talking about it earlier. Like, I just can't stop talking about it.
Okay.
I love that book.
We need
go
to
read that book. Yeah, go read that book.
The last book that just stopped you in your tracks. Is it going to be the same answer?
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm still thinking about that Addie LaRue book. Did you guys read that, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue? I just think that was the most beautiful book of last year, or whenever it was. I don't know. I'm still thinking about that book. I think it's time for me to reread that book.
The big book that everyone's read that you have not yet read? Or you've read every book?
No, I haven't read every book. What's the big... I haven't read, I don't read Stephen King. I never read, so I haven't read that. Yeah, so I know he has a new, but, I don't know. I don't read horror.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Actor to play Sarah in a movie?
Oh, God, I really didn't think of any of these before. I don't really have someone for Sarah. I have someone for Abby.
Good, that's
though.
my next question, so you can answer that one.
I just keep thinking that actress Zoe Deutsch. You know her, I really like her. I feel like she would be really funny. I've seen her in some funny. There was a movie with her and Bryan Cranston called Why Him, I think.
Okay.
Where she plays the daughter and she's engaged to this terrible guy, and I think she'd be really funny as Abby, because I think Abby, it would be a very funny kind of thing where she keeps thinking people should be together, and it would be like a madcap thing. And
this is fun to think about, and we'll keep thinking about Sarah.
Okay.
Social media, love it, hate it, mixed bag?
I really do. I really like Twitter. I like to spar with Annabelle Monaghan, who's here on Twitter. That's a lot of fun. I like to Annabelle writes something, and I like to write something back. Yeah, Twitter's fun. I'm really terrible at taking photos, but I do appreciate Instagram a lot. But I feel like Facebook has been really wonderful for finding readers, especially with the first 2 books. Facebook has been really great.
Yeah. Morning person or night owl?
I'm a night owl, but sometimes I have to get up early, so I don't know, but a night owl.
You wrote a great essay in Zibby Owen's anthology about how you slept during COVID, during the quarantine, in a closet on an airbed. Yeah. Your year of magical sleeping,
My year of magical sleeping, yeah. So when Ellie came home for COVID and Adele was there, and then Ellie's boyfriend came too. So I had a lot of people in the house at some points, and Bob snores. So, poor Bob. So, if the kids are not home or there's an extra space, in the middle of the night, around 3 a.m, I'll get up and I'll go to wherever I go if he's snoring. But I couldn't because all the beds in the house were taken. Yeah. And then I would have gone to the couch, but they were up really late. The kid, they were wandering around the house at 3 a.m. So and the boyfriend was there, so I wasn't gonna go to sleep on my couch. That'd be so weird if he walked by. Why is your mother on the couch? I don't know. It would be weird. And so I was kind of feeling very sleep deprived. And also I had Ellie had her bedroom to do work in. Bob had his office to do work in. David, the boyfriend, was in the basement. Adele was in my office upstairs. Charlie was in his room. But I kind of didn't have a place. And then one night, Bob was snoring, and I took the air mattress. I have my closet's a mess, but it's big. And it's ridiculous. It's too big, and I don't even have anything in it. It's just a lot of floor space. So Bob was that's not going to fit, and I said it would, and it did. And we put the air mattress in the closet, and then I would sleep in the closet. But I was so happy because I felt like Harry Potter in the cupboard. And then all my creative juices came back because I had a little space of my own, and I could just write again. And then I would go into the closet.
I was going to say, were those the same nights that your characters were talking to you?
Yeah, a lot of the time.
All right, so thank you.
I would be really happy.
Snoring.
He would snore, and then I'd be I'm going to go in the closet and think about my characters.
Hang out with Sarah and Abby.
I know, I did. It's really weird.
Well, we have this to thank, or we have you to thank for that. Okay, who is your first reader when you're writing? Who are you writing for? Who are you sharing your first draft with?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yourself.
I think me. Yeah.
Well,
good. Bob hears a lot of it, but Bob hears it in pieces. like it's piecemeal, and depending on his mood, he's really into it, or he's just like, oh my God, can I please just like watch Game of Thrones? Like, it depends. So he's like sometimes very excited about it and sometimes not. So but I really write, I think it's me first. Yeah. And then like a lot of like, I'll run stuff by all these guys over here on this end of the room, the front row.
Biggest challenge as a writer?
Focusing sometimes. And kind of, so people think if you're not a writer that you can write whatever you want. Like if you've written a book and it did okay, people think you could just go write another book about whatever you want. But you can't really do that because you are constrained by just what people will read, what people want to read following your book. Like this book has opened up a different path for me, but it sort of bridged the sort of family stories that I was telling, and now I'm sort of veering into a slightly different direction. But I couldn't go from there to something like, I couldn't go from that to writing a horror story.
Stephen King, which we know you don't read anyway.
Right, which I don't read anyway. But I couldn't, even if I wanted to, because it just doesn't work. And editors don't want that either, because you fall into kind of a pattern and you develop readers. I remember actually the funniest thing was when I talked to Marley, when I wrote my first book. You write your first book and nobody tells you that you should have another book like ready to go, like, which I totally didn't at all. And I had some idea and Marley said, well, but your readers, and I was like, Marley, I don't have any readers. My book hasn't even come out yet. And you said, but you will. But it is true. Like you can't, you're constrained a little bit. So that's the tough thing, because I have a really unfocused brain, and I think of I'm like, I have this great, my friend Elise is here. Elise is like, you should write that book about that story that you told me about, like all the people that die in the plane crash, which is like this story that I thought of a long time ago. I'm like, Elise, I can't write that story. I don't write that kind of a book. So like, you have to adapt. You have to be light on your feet. That's the hardest thing. Yeah.
Advice you would give to an aspiring writer, is that?
The advice, so my writing teacher, Stephen Schnurr, is here. And I remember in one of the very first classes, he said the difference between like people who are published writers and people who are just writing for fun is that the published writers just don't stop writing. And so that's just, you can't stop. Like you have to just keep going, and you can't give up, and you have to just keep. I mean, I wrote a whole book, that is in my drawer. I wrote 2 other half books because, like I said, I can be kind of unfocused, and I start going down a path that isn't the right path, and then I have to kind of set it aside and then figure out what is really, truly the story that I want to tell. Like, what story do I really, really, really want to tell that people also really want to read? So that it's both.
So our lightning round, you're too good. There's too much good stuff there. Our lightning round turned more into like a ponderous walk.
I'm not good at the lightning round.
That was so great. And we have a few minutes left. We can allow now or open this up to the audience if there are any questions or comments, and we can hear from everybody here too. If not, I can keep going. Yes, and you can say the question and then I repeat it for the live stream, right? Or for the recording? Okay, perfect. Hi.
So the question is, how much, when I start a story, do I know how it's going to end, and how much develops as I'm writing? So I definitely know how it's going to end. I mean, there's different stages. Before I ever start writing, I know how it's going to end. I know like the general outline in my head, but I kind of get more specific as the story goes along. So I know what the beginning is. I know the sort of like, maybe there's 10 dramatic points that I want to get to. And when I get about a third of the way through the book, I start to outline, and I get more specific about like, okay, I have this much room left to get to the end. And then when when I have 200 pages, when I have just 100, then I get very specific, and my outlines I get more detailed outlining the closer I get to the end, because then I know these things, I have to connect all the dots, and I have to like put all the layers together, and I have to get to the ending the right way. So it gets like more specific and more directed as I go along. So.
So fascinating. That is so interesting. I've never heard anybody describe it that way.
Oh, I don't know.
What books did you love as a child?
I loved that Edward Eger book that I said, Half Magic by Edward Eger. I had my mom's copy of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which is like the quintessential, that was a big inspiration for my first book too. I love that story. And that's, about immigrants, and that's, I love that. I loved all the Judy Blume books. Those were all great. Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret. All those books I loved. I don't know, I just read a lot when I was little. I loved The Cat Ate My Jumpsuit by Paula Danziger. I don't know if anybody read that. But that one, I saw that one like the other day. I don't know where I saw it, but I loved that. Yeah.
Yeah, all the way in the back.
In your research, did you encounter any female matchmakers, or did that all come from
Did I encounter, sorry? Female matchmakers?
Female matchmakers.
You know what? I didn't find any stories about female matchmakers in, none of the articles or things. I found some stuff about a matchmaker union in Poland, but that was all men too. Like I didn't find anything about women. I know there definitely were female matchmakers, but they just weren't in the majority at the time.
So that was Adele's grandmother.
Well,
right?
no, because Adele's grandmother was a matchmaker in 1977.
Okay.
I mean, that was a whole different,
Okay.
that was, I feel like today there are a lot of them. Like today, probably the bulk of them would be women. But it's sort of an interesting study in like women in the workforce, right? Because back then it was a serious business that you would earn your living from. And today, I don't know, I mean, maybe there are people who earn their living, but it feels more like something that would be a supplemental income, like that you would do as a part-time, I don't know. It's just like a different thing. So.
Like pharmacists,
Yeah.
probably, like a female pharmacist.
Yeah, I don't know.
Awesome.
Yeah. I don't know what, yeah. Hi, Jackie.
Hi. So have you ever set up anyone successfully, a successful match?
That is
I
a good
haven't.
question.
Yeah, I haven't.
You should repeat
Yeah.
the question so people can hear it.
People said, have I ever set up anybody successfully? Did I ever make a match? I haven't. My best friend from college, Leslie, who is not here, I set her up with a lot of people, but none of it ever stuck. But Bob and I were set up. Bob and I had a blind date. So Bob's office mate for his summer job was my roommate in law school, and she set us up.
And she saw the arc of light
I don't
between
know.
you two.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I think she just got lucky.
There was someone had a question in the back. Yeah.
I'm curious, two parts to this question. I'm curious if over the year, the time you spent thinking about matchmaking, which we think of as very old world, school thing, if your view of matchmaking changed, if you think it's a good thing or an outdated thing, or are you team matchmaker or team Tinder?
Good question.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think people need help finding people, for sure. So that's why we have Tinder and Hinge and all the apps that the kids use, the kids these days. So I think there's an element of luck, to be sure. I just think that there is. But I think that a matchmaker or an app helps people make connections, helps people, just have somebody to meet, more people to try. But I do think, I mean, nobody knows why anybody actually falls in love, right? It's just, there is an element of the unknown, of the magical, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you would say the word is, but it's the unknown. We don't know why, what attracts one person to another person. It's just something in the ether. I don't know.
You did that so brilliantly in the book too, because since your matchmakers were matching for love, you got this sense as the reader, the way you wrote it, that, I mean, for a while, they were doing their work without the people even knowing that they were being set. So you got the sense that as long as they could just kind of throw them in a, not even in a room together, but across the street or whatever, that sort of forces larger than people would sort of
Yeah.
come into play then and make it happen. You just
Yeah.
wrote that so beautifully.
I mean, I really do think, I don't know if I'm team matchmaker, but remember like when people used to have dinner parties, like before, like even like when we were young, like, well, Allison's very young, but when Bob and I were young, in New York City, we used to have dinner parties, like, and there was something nice about, it wasn't matchmaking in the romantic sense, but there was something really nice. I really like it when I introduce one friend to another friend and you know that they're going to really like each other, right? Like that's to me, that's a great feeling to just connect people. So even though I have never made a successful, the Yiddish word is a shidduch, like I've never made a successful romantic match, I have I feel like, or I used to do that more in the city where like you introduce people to other people and they become friends. Like that's a great feeling too, yeah.
Relationships.
I think that's wonderful. So. I don't know.
Wonderful.
I'm team connection.
Yeah. There you go. You have another.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yep.
Sour, half sour, or no?
All right.
I'm half sour. I'm not. I know you're full sour. I can't go full sour, Mark. I gotta go half sour. Yeah. Good question. Best question of the night.
I just want you to know I'm a matchmaker.
You are?
Yes.
Joan, I would have interviewed you. I didn't know that.
Well, only one couple, but it was
Claps for Joan. That's awesome. Okay. Wow.
That is.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you all came. I'm so glad you came for our first time.
Thanks.
This was wonderful. Thank you both. I'm sure you all enjoyed this. They all